Doesn't seem maybe like that's really the case.
Again, this is all about gaming everybody else's attitude, but I would keep an eye on that. By the way, Russell people told me today that the Russell 1000 and 2000 consistently have been higher a week after the Fed speaks. So the Fed does have some movement.
For years that once they say something, most of the upside of the market comes in. Bob Pisani, thanks very much. Turns out Mylan actually was up earlier in the day, is down, so that whole healthcare sector under some pressure today. Ringing the bell, our friends from the Women's Olympic rowing crew up there. There you go, and they seem to have done it perfectly well. Second hour of Closing Bell is all yours, Cal.
They pulled it off pretty well there. Welcome to the Closing Bell, everybody. I'm Kelly Evans. A down day again here on Wall Street. That makes 2 in a row as we continue to recede from closing near all-time highs. We've still now had those high water marks recorded about the middle of the month, August 15th. The Dow today dropping 30 points to 18,450. The S&P down about 3, a little bit less than that to 2172. And the NASDAQ down about 5 points to 5212. Interestingly, it held up okay, but there's a lot of pressure on the biotech, pharma, and healthcare spaces that we will talk about. Coming up, we'll be joined first on CNBC by Senator Amy Klobuchar. We'll talk to her about her call for the Federal Trade Commission to investigate the increasing prices of EpiPens. As Mike just mentioned, Mylan shares suffering from that again today. CNBC senior markets commentator and pro columnist Mr. Santoli is back with us this hour. So is CNBC contributor Stephanie Link of TIAA Global Asset Management. Welcome, Stephanie. And CNBC Fast Money trader Brian Kelly. Brian, good to have you on board as well. Mike, first of all, I mean, healthcare was one of the best performers in this whole market. It is now, I think, at risk of going negative year to date, or at least being an underperformer.
Yeah, it was one of those sectors that I think it's got the combination of growth and value and income. People can love it. Biotech definitely had been leading the way down. Now you have the rest of the whole kind of healthcare food chain joining it. Yet it's offset by everything else. It seems like that's what this market does. If certain retailers are down, other ones are up. And it seems as if basically the market just wants to kind of absorb all these forces and do nothing until perhaps we get that Fed move. And we're right in the middle of the month-long range. We're in that neutral condition waiting for that catalyst.
Some big moves in the retail space today, Stephanie. We had Tiffany way up, Signet way down. We had the dollar stores getting whacked. I mean, Dollar General is down 18%.
I know, and I think that's the big story today. I know we're going to talk about healthcare a little bit later, and that is very important for sure, but I think the fact that consumer is such an important part to our economy, 70% of GDP. So we got to see and make sure that the consumer is staying healthy. And I will say on the conference calls of Dollar General and Dollar Tree, it wasn't that encouraging. In fact, Dollar General talked quite consistently about the consumer and the struggles that the consumer is having, particularly as it relates to higher healthcare costs.
And
we've known that, right? But we thought maybe better jobs, better wages, lower oil prices would help. They also said they're not seeing a trade up, that sometimes when the economy is doing a little better, their customer trades a little bit higher end. Not seeing that either. So really have to get down and deep into this. These stocks have been great performers, so that's part of it in terms of the performance today, and they're not cheap. But got to keep an eye on the consumer.
But, Brian, it's interesting. You look at the price hikes that the states are allowing for Obamacare exchanges. In Tennessee, at 60%. Others, it averages down to maybe 25%. Now we know that if you're going back to school, you have to spend as much on an EpiPen as your kid's cost of clothes.
Right. Well, I mean, and this is the issue that's out there with the consumer, as Stephanie just said. Add into the fact that not only the healthcare costs going up, but let's look at oil. Oil is significantly off the lows. Through the summer driving season here, gasoline prices are higher. So anything that cushioned the consumer in the beginning of the year, i.e. oil prices, is starting to come off the table here. So you do have to be a big concern. When it comes to retail, it has been so lumpy. You've seen great sales out of Amazon. And until you see Amazon sales break, I think it's going to be hard to make a case against the consumer.
All right, we'll come back to this in just a moment. Mylan CEO Heather Bresch speaking out this morning for the first time about the company's EpiPen price hikes, saying she's reached out to a number of senators regarding this issue.
The leaders, the senators, I've called all of them. I want to have a face-to-face meeting. Price is one part of the problem. There's no question.
Because a bunch of bipartisan senators would like to speak with you as well.
Well, that's good because they haven't called me back to set a date. I said anytime to
senators?
Oh, I reached out to Senator Grassley, Klobuchar, Senator Warner.
You've reached out to them
personally.
In the last when? Last 2 days?
2 days ago, I called them and said I welcome the. They haven't called me back. They haven't said it. I said as soon as you can meet, I'm there.
Well, joining us now in a First on CNBC interview is the Democratic senior senator from Minnesota, Amy Klobuchar, who's now calling for a Federal Trade Commission investigation of Mylan. Senator, thank you for joining us. Has Heather Bresch indeed gotten in touch with you?
Oh, she has. I actually did call her back about within a few hours after she called me the night before, and we have talked and we're going to meet. I do appreciate that they've done something to make it a little less hard of a hit on consumers with the assistance that they're giving now, but I don't think that that fixes a systemic problem that we're seeing across pharmaceuticals, where the top 10 drugs in America, 4 of them have had over 100% increases in just the last few years.
And we'll come back to that in just a moment. I don't mean to turn this into a she said, but just so we understand the timeline here. So if Heather Bresch reached out to you a couple of days ago, you said not only did you return her call, but you had a conversation. You have a meeting scheduled. That was all before we heard from her this morning?
Yeah, I hate these kinds of things. What happened was she called the next day. I did call back, and then we had trouble setting up a call, and we spoke today. So really, I really don't think that's as much the issue as helping Americans get better prices on pharmaceuticals, getting more generics in the market, and also trying to, my bill with John McCain, to allow some cheaper drugs, safer drugs to come in from Canada to create some competition, not to mention allowing negotiation under Medicare Part D and harnessing the marketing power of all those seniors so we can get some better deals.
It's fascinating to some extent what's happened here, because a couple of years ago you were one of the co-signers for the bill to get epinephrine or EpiPen into schools, and you have some personal experience with this. So how is it that you've now ended up going from, in a sense, being a partner of Mylan's to make this legislation happen and get these EpiPens in schools, to now being, in many ways, an adversary?
Okay, let's go back. I think most doctors would agree that you want to have this kind of drug in the classroom. It's life-saving. My own daughter has severe nut allergies. She has one of these with her all the time. But we want that kind of drug. We don't need that exact company providing the drug. My wish is that there'd be a generic alternative, that there'd be a competitor. One was actually recalled. One has been delayed in their approval. And that's why we're also calling on the FDA to get a generic approved. So my view, it's not that it has to be this company's drug. It just has to be this type of product that saves lives. That's the number one thing. Number two, my view is that we need to change things so that we bring the prices of these drugs down. You look at not just this product, but across the board, we've seen enormous increases that are making it tougher and tougher for consumers. And I believe that we need to pass some of these bills. I do not understand why we cannot have negotiation of prices under Medicare, just like we do for the VA. I do not understand why generics and the big pharma are allowed to make deals to keep products off the market. It's called pay for delay, and Senator Grassley and I have a bill to stop that. I challenge my colleagues to vote against a bill like that. And finally, McCain and I think we should bring in cheaper products from Canada. That would get competition going in this market instead of the kind of monopoly power that we see in so many drug lines.
So this morning, one of the comments from the Mylan CEO was that she said people in Washington don't understand what's going on. It sounds like you're actually trying to lay out a number of ways to get at the heart of this issue. From your point of view, if you're going to change these price increases overnight, even though doing those reforms to Medicare and things that you mentioned would help in some aspects, it still seems like there's nothing to prevent a company, absent of the media scrutiny and the outrage that's following, from being able to do what we've now seen a number of times.
Well, exactly. You don't want to have the only way you get drug prices down is have public outcry and people like me go on TV. There's better things that people can watch. And so what I think we need to do is, number one, you do go after bad actors. That's why we have the FTC and the Antitrust Division of the Justice Department. That's why we have the Senate Antitrust Subcommittee, of which I'm the ranking member. And we have had instances, including some of the pay-for-delay deals, where the FTC has gotten involved. As you know, just having raw market power and price gouging is not enough to trigger the antitrust laws. You have to show that this company is using that market power in some way by colluding, by entering contracts that keep competitors off the market. So that's the enforcement piece that must be in place and strong, but changing some of the rules of the game to allow for more competition in the market is clearly the way we approach this systemically.
And we're almost out of time, but is it clear to you then that Mylan here has been a bad actor?
I don't like what Mylan did. I've made that very clear the last few days. I'm glad that they've made some advance toward making it easier for consumers to buy these. I still think